So should the proportions of affordable housing required take into account existing use value, as is in the case with the current UDP policy? And what that means is basically what Keith was saying. He's saying if something's an office block at the moment, that piece of land has an existing use value. And in terms of looking at what affordable housing could come forward off the site if it was redeveloped, should we continue to take into account what the existing use value is? Because if that existing use value is very high, one of our concerns, as Keith's just noted, is that we just won't get the development. And what we're concerned about is if they can leave it as an office block, for example, then it will be left as an office block and we'll end up with no net housing gain whatsoever. The woman down
yes, I don't understand your dilemma. Because if you've got office space that's never used, not rented, sitting there vacant, month in, year out, don't you have the legal means to secure that stuff and say, okay, you're not going to rent it or use it for commercial reasons, we can now rezone you and use it for property. And if you don't have that, I think you're crazy.
Could I respond to
yes,
that?
Yeah.
There are many buildings in the city that can be used for either different purposes by conversion or they can be redeveloped. There may be a building that is in an office use and could continue in offices perfectly well, effectively, forever, and that's a current market value. But you could have an opportunity to knock it down and provide some homes. It'll only happen if the value of those completed homes is greater than the existing office building. Otherwise, there are no homes. The question I think we're being asked is, do you take that into account when you're trying to decide whether or not, or how much affordable housing you can get? And I think the answer is not really should you take that question into account. You have to take it into account if you will get that conversion to residential use. And I don't think you cannot take it out of the equation. Can I make one other very quick point, if I may? Because there's an implication in what's been said. There will be no shops, no new homes, no new offices, no new factories without developers. Developers will only invest if they get a reward for the risk that they take. And for this plan to work, it must continue to make the incentive for people to invest in the city. If we don't achieve that, there will be no additional homes or anything else. And I think that's a context remark that goes behind this question. I think it's hugely important and needs to be borne in mind.
Okay.
Can I answer that one? You have compulsory purchase powers. Why don't you use them? That's the first question. If you can't, for some reason, legally against your better judgment, I'm afraid you've got a problem, and that's probably central government, not you. But compulsory purchase powers do exist, and even if it costs the earth to buy an existing office block, knock it down and build a block of flats which has social housing content, it will have to be subsidised either by some central government or from some other source which I know not, and we've got to ask that question of Mr. Gordon Brown and his friends, because they don't seem to know how to deal with it either.
So you're saying make greater use of the council's compulsory purchase
Well,
powers?
yes, but can you get the money to do it? That's the question you have to find an answer to. I can't give it to you, only central government.
This gentleman over here.
Yes, I think the viability of the developers is really not the question. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the large-scale developers we're talking about that develop into in Westminster are financially at risk. Some of their share value may be at risk. So it's the level of profitability we're talking about, not the lack of profitability. And we can't have a situation where the tail is wagging the dog, and that, sadly, is what seems to be happening. And we've got to balance that. I'm not suggesting that every time the developers are wrong, that every turn they're not looking after the interest of the city. And that'd be an outrageous statement to make. But it just seems to me that as each year goes by, as land becomes more valuable, because the more high-value properties you build, the higher value the land becomes. It's obvious. And we've got to get to a point where the council has an ability to balance the influence and the strength of the developer. That doesn't mean to say that you take them on at every turn, but we have to find imaginative ways which we can argue that yes, there can be a mix of residential and commercial use. That's something that developers we should be looking at. There's nothing to stop them having a commercial use at the first 3 floors and residential use above that. Other cities do that. There's nothing unusual about that. And I just think we need, to be a bit more adaptable. And I just get this feeling all the time that the developers are just driven coarsely by this need to get a higher share value, because the higher number of high-value properties they have in their portfolio, the higher their share value is. And we've really got to try and temper that influence.
Okay. Were there any other views on this question that anyone wanted to raise?
What is affordability? Of a man's wages.
What?
If you're getting £300 a week, right, and some of your rents now are 120, like I said, the Million's 200 and off the wall stuff, where are they going to go? Like you said, who's going to pay it? Taxpayers are going to pay it.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, they are at the minute.
Yes, because the way the government works. But you could do it another way. I don't want to go into it in detail now, but compulsory purchase power is a matter of law.
Yeah, I know
Once
that
you've
one.
got a legal right, you can stand on your legal rights and say, you will do this, that or the other, and then you have to find the money.
Yeah, but
And the problem is, if you've got people like Brown running the country, with great respect to the
well, I'm
gentleman,
going to vote for him. Go on.
well, that's not the point. You'll have to vote for someone, he might
Yeah.
be worse. What I'm trying to say is there are compulsory purchase powers under Acts of Parliament. Now, if the council...
Use the mic, Roseanne.
Oh, sorry, you've got the notes things. Thank you. If you've got compulsory purchase powers, you don't have to worry about what the government may do or not do. You use them. And then what follows goes back to central government. Who pays at the end of the day is another matter. You
Yeah,
should
but what
be-
happens in those cases now, because it's not a law, it's the if
It
they
is a law.
no, it is a law, but to try and fight a developer, yes,
No,
you
not you
use
personally,
no,
the
the
council.
ratepayers of this borough will do it,
Council
and if
has
he's a
the
rich
power.
developer, he can throw all the money he likes, so that at the end of the day he wins,
No, he doesn't.
because we have to think
No,
of the
he
ratepayers.
doesn't, because it's law. You've
it?
got to get a good lawyer to fight it.
I can't.
Yes,
afford
can we